Begin the Quran Daf, Mesechta Bava Kama Daf Kuf Beis. We begin at the top line of the Yomim, where the Gemara is in the middle of a discussion on the previous Daf. We had introduced Rav Rami. Rav had posed contradictions because it was related to the theme we discussed in the Kaval and Manal regarding these dyes that that you dye from Shemitah produce or Arla produce. So we had asked regarding the halachas of Arla and Shemitah, regarding a stira, regarding utilizing these in some of the cases were related to dyes itself. Now, one of the last principles we said on the top of this Amud was from Rava that Stam Eitzim Lasakei Namdin. We said that regarding wood, it doesn't have Kedusha Shvius. Why? Because it's the Hana and the Bi'ura at the same time. It has to be similar to eating. Eating, your pleasure at the same time you're consuming it. Wood is only after it turns into Dakal. The Gemara says you have eitzim demashchan, you have oily wood which you could use as a flame, and then you get into pleasure at the same time it's consuming it, which is what illumination is. This on that Rabbi says no, stop eitzim lasagin. It's generally used for fuel, not for illumination, and therefore it's not going to have lacha shmita. And I think I was going to say this principle, if eitzim lasagin or not, is actually machlokes tanam. Mashiach goes back to Kazakh and Chesed turns them Daf Yomi, turns them established b'schus v'chin when they saw net stroll of that entire world. So we're discussing today's Daf are, which we said in the previous Mishnah, Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda regarding if you're going to dye it red and you dye it black. So Gemara says halacha like Rabbi Yehuda regarding this halacha, you only get the lesser of the two amounts. The Gemara introduces the concept of Machlekes v'apkach stam halacha gestam. When you have a Machlekes in one Mishnah, and then you have later on an anonymous Mishnah on that same halacha, you go like that halacha of the anonymous Mishnah. Now, regarding the case of a nice mois l'shluchet, what happens if someone gives money to his agent? It gets a little bit complex actually. Likach lechidin. This is what the Gemara discusses in Lamed Beis. And to buy wheat, but look at when he buys barley. Or let's say barley buys wheat. So the first price says, well, if it's going to be a loss now, it's going to be a loss to the agent. And if it's going to be a profit, because the profit goes to him. Second price says, no, if it's a loss, it's his loss. But if it's a gain, they have to split the profits. So that seems to be a contradiction. Rabbi explains, well, the first price is your mayor, well, Shina Kaina. So whatever the change you do, the shliach is gonna be his on his cost or benefit, and the second price is Rabbi Yehuda holds that Shina is not Kaina. A second person brings says no, Havahar and Mayor. Actually, both are mayor, but as we'll see, he's going to make a differentiation regarding how we understand the difference between these two prices. So beginning our daf, we are first finishing the conversation from the previous daf on the Kubei's Amanaf top line. Bava Kama, he says, "Eitzim lasaka." This idea about wood being used as fuel, specifically tanoihi, which again, it's actually a little bit of a complex point, but there is a man da'amid. There's someone who says that stam eitzim, you're right, unspecific wood is meant for fuel, and therefore the halacha shmita will not take effect even on eitzim demashchat, even on oily wood. But there is an opinion that holds that actually, no, it's not true. We don't assume wood is a certain way, and the eitzim demashchat, the oily wood, the halacha shmita will take effect in it because it is hanos and the biur and shabbat. Where do we see this? The time learning the braysa. In meisin peir shviyas, you don't give over shmita produce, which again is limited, it's restricted to what you could use Shemitah produce for. You can't give it loyla mishra. In other words, you can't soak your flax in Shemitah wine. Loyla kvusa. You cannot launder your garment in that type of wine, because that's considered l'schayr. That's considered doing business with it, not for eating purposes. And Hashem doesn't let you use Shemitah produce for these other ulterior utilities. Now, Rabbi Shloimy says, no, you could put the Shemitah produce into the soaking for the flax and for the laundry. So what's the reason that they hold that you cannot do this? Because you could use it for eating with mission, not for soaking, for eating with not for laundry. Rabbi Yisrael says no. The pasuk says in the pasuk that v'haisa Shabbos lachem lachem is inclusionary terminology. All you need laundry and for soaking your flax and so on. But Rabban that makes it lechem says, what did the Rabban do with lechem? No, lechem doing the la'achla. Whatever including in lechem has to be similar to la'achla. It has to be something, yes, you could, not only for eating, but it has to be misha and also and it has to be where the pleasure and the depleting of that item have to be happening at the same time. So the pleasure has to be at the time when it's destroying that item from the world. Then you could have that pleasure from the Perish or Shemitah before there's man of the beer. But Yatsu Misha B'Kusa, that excludes the soaking or of the flax or of the laundry. The pleasure is after it's ruined, meaning the moment that you put the flax or the garment into the wine's ruined already. But the pleasure is only 3 days later or 4 days later when the flax is soaked, and so too the garment is now laundered. So the hana is not the same time as the beer. Now says Gemara, what does he do with that? True, lechem has to be similar to la'achla, has to be at the same time, and it's not. He says no. That la'achla that we have to be lechem similar to, no, la'achla is teaching you something else. As we learned in the Bryce, la'achla, it says in the passage that the shemitah produce is for you to eat, and not for like using it as a plaster of like a bandage. Is that really so? That you say la'achla to eat, it means and not for medicinal purposes? Maybe it's like the Rabbanan said, no, it's only to tell you could eat, but not for laundry. No, the pasuk says for you, that's including things that you get pleasure from, like laundry. That's permitted. So what am I reading in that it's only for eating? It means it means for eating, not for bandages. So wait a second. Where do you see fit to include from lachem laundry and then to say from la'achla it says mugma? Why don't you say the other way around? And that says the Gemara, no. I'm going to include laundry. It's lachem. Everyone does laundry, and that's going to be included. I'm going to exclude for bandages, which that's not something that's equal by every single type of a person, because that's only necessary for chaylim, for sick people, and therefore that's what's being excluded. Says the Gemara, according to whom is it go like the following brisa that says that the shemitah bird is for eating and not for bandaging, for eating and not for sprinkling. They would sprinkle wine in the house to give a good smell. Here also, it's also not shalom b'chaladim, because zila is only for the more refined, more delicate, more people that need those in the plugins, those that has to have a good smell. Those people, and alachla, and that cannot be used. It's for eating and not to use as a way of like vomiting, like they would do something to vomit. Come on, who's that like? That's Rabbi Yesi. How do we know it's Rabbi Yesi? Because dikrabanan ikanami misha b'chmusa. You also have more than just these cases. You have even laundry that you can't do. And here we're only picking things that are not shabbat chaladim. If it was like Rabbanan, you would have picked even things that are like soaking and for laundry. Now, so Rashi in the Masal Yatsu Mishnah B'Chlusa says, this is the Machlekes Tanoim that we start off the daf with. That Rav Kana said that Itzim Lasok is a Tanoi. Why? Rabbanan hold stam payers. Again, do we say such an idea of stam? Unspecific produce is for eating. So Kedusha Shviyas takes effect, now, like we said before, because anything that the Hana and the Biur is happening at the same time, it takes effect. So therefore, even if you had picked these grapes for soaking your flaxen or for doing laundry for your garment, that thought does not help to remove the Isser like it should be, like we said, by the leaves of the reeds which you gathered for the purposes of wood that's permitted. Because there we said that's like a middle type of category. It's unspecifically used for this or for that. But by peves, which is generally used for eating purposes, and the moment it's created, the Kedusha Shviyas takes effect, so it doesn't help anymore your thought to remove it. And it's going to be forbidden to use for soaking and for laundry, because you're not having pleasure from the Kedusha Shmita, only something that's similar to Achila, and it's not, because it's not happening at the same time. So therefore you could say, by wood is the same thing also. You could say, just like Stam Peiros has Kedusha Shviyas, Stam Eitzim is the other way around, is La Saka Nitnu, and it does not take effect to Isser Shmita, even Eitzim the Mishchan, which the pleasure would be at the same time, because you say Stam. But Rabbi Yesi would hold, no, we don't say Stam Peiros are Fachila, and therefore his thought process is effective, just like by the leaves of the grapevines or of the reeds, that when you picked it for the purposes of soaking, it is something that the Hana is not at the same time as the beer, and therefore the Isser Shmita he held does not take effect, and therefore he held that's going to be mutter. So you could say the same thing in the reverse too. By Eitzim, you could say L'chumra, that if you picked it for the purposes of Lahasaka, like Eitzim the Mishcha, which it would be at the same time, then actually it would be Aser. So you see that this halach of Stam Eitzim Masaka in them is a machlokes Tanoim. Now, going back to the halach of Mishnah, of the case of, let's say you asked an ummah to dye the wool red, he dyed it black, or vice versa. So we had this machlekes. Rabbi Meir said that you give him the value of the wool because he's kind of with a shinoi. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, im hashevach b'chulu, he said, depends. He gets the lower hand. If the improvement is more than the expenses, you get only expenses. If the expenses is more than of the ummah was more than what he made it better, you give him only the amount that he made it better. Now, the Gemara brings a mnemonic Simon, Sabin, which is the name of the Amiron that are in this next Gemara. Yosef Rabbi Yosef Achid Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Yosef, that's the Samach, was sitting behind Rabbi Abba. that's the base, who is Kamed Rav Huna, which is the nun, who was sitting in front of Rav Huna. Yosef Rav Huna was sitting and saying like this. Halacha Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, which doesn't tell us yet what halacha that is, but look at Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda looks like Rabbi Yehuda. Now, remember, Rabbi Yosef was behind Rabbi, who was in front of Rav Huna. Rabbi Yosef, in anger, turned his face away in objection, indicating objection to Rav Huna's statement. Amay says like this: Bishlam Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, I understand that Rav Huna had to say halacha Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. It was necessary. So when you would have thought to say, as we know, the halachic dictum, when you have an individual opposing the many, the halacha is like the many. He had to say, in this case, halacha is like the individual opinion, which, as Gemara explained to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, what was it Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, Rabbi Shloimy say halacha is like? Then like Linda Brisa. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, milva b'shtar, if someone has a recorded loan owed to him, he's not allowed to collect from the idol worshiper before their holidays, because the non-Jew is going to be happy. He's going to go give thanks to his idol on the holiday. Said, "I'm done with this Jew. I paid him up already." So you cannot collect from him a recorded loan. But milva peh, regarding an oral loan, so that's permitted. Because that's like saving it from them, because if you don't collect it, he could always deny it. He could always deny it because it's not recorded. A recorded document, a recorded loan, you could go at any time. Orally, you never know. You might lose out. So then that's like saving, which Rashi points out. The Rabbanan, they held that no, you're not allowed to pay or get paid from them at all, because he still might thank his avodah zarah. So that halacha, Rav Huna was saying, is like Mishum Karcha, that oral loan, you are allowed to go and collect, and that's a chiddush. I understand why you have to say this. Like Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah, Lamali. Why do you even have to say that? This is a machloikis v'achakach stami. It's a machloikis, which then you have an anonymous Mishnah saying like one of the opinions, and I don't need to say. And we all know machloikis v'achakach stam, machloikis stam. When you say machloikis, and then you subsequently Rabbi Yehuda, unless he put it anonymously, he was telling halachas like that. I don't need you to tell me halachas Rabbi Yehuda, as Yomai explains. Machloikis is Bava Kama. In this, we know that the Bava Kama is the first part of these Nezikin, as the Gemara is going to shortly say. In the first part, which is in our Masechta, our Mishnah says this machlekes. If let's say you ask the owner, let's say to dye red, let's have a chocolate, he dyes a black. Chocolate, so I'm asking him to dye black, he does a red. Your mayor says no, you give him the value of the wool because he owes you claim with shinoi. Rabbi Yehuda says no, we're not claiming with shinoi. We penalize him. He says, if the improvement that the guy did it was more than the expenses, you only give him you only give him those expenses. If his expense was more than what he even did, he spent 1,000, it's only worth 200 more, you only give him the shavach, which is this idea of the one who changed, who deviated from the contract, he has the lower hand. That's a stam b'ba metzia. In the middle part of this Seid Nezikin of this Masechta, the next Masechta we call Bava Metzia, we have an anonymous Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches over there on Daf Ayin Vav, Kol HaMashana, whoever deviates from the norm, Yod Alav he has the lower hand. Whoever backs out, Yod Alav has the lower hand. So Rabbi Yosef was upset. What's Rav Huna teaching? This is a Machlekes Stam. It's a later Mishnah that's anonymous, which is like Rabbi Yehuda. So why did Rabbi Huna say it? Itzrach was necessary. So you would have thought to say Ein Seid the Mishnah, that maybe there's no order for the Mishnah is that sometimes he would teach it not in the order, and maybe really Bava Metzia was taught, and then after the Bava Kama, and therefore maybe it's the Stam Achach Machlekesi. So therefore he had to say halacha like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef says, if that's the case, Kol Machlekes V'Achach Stam. Then every time you have Machlekes and Stam anonymously, name it in the Mishnah. You say there's no order in the Mishnah, but Stam Achach Machlekes. Maybe it's Stam Achach Machlekes. What are you talking about? How can we ever say this Talmudic dictum? Rav Huna says no. Ki lo yaminan ein seid Mishnah. When do we not say that there's no order? I mean that we say that there is an order. That's B'chad Masechta. In one Masechta we say that there's a deliberate order. Ki lo yamin. When do we not say ein seid Mishnah? There's no order. It's B'chad Masechta. Right? There's one Masechta. But three Masechtas are meaning. But by two Masechtas, that we do say that maybe there's no specific order. Maybe this Masechta was before that one. So therefore, even though Bava Metzia has its stam, I had to tell you halach is like the machlekes over here in Rebuda. Rabbi Yosef says no. Kulan Zigan Chad Masechti. Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra. The reason why they call those names is all one Masechta called Masechta Nezikin. and Baba is the gate, the first gate, the middle gate, and the last gate. So it's all one Masechta, and if it is Machlokes Zachach Stam, and then you don't have to tell me Halacha like Rabbi Yehuda. Or if you want, you could say another approach, that the reason why Rabbi Yosef knew that anonymous Mishnah Bava Metzia is primary, and if I don't need you to tell me Halacha like Rabbi Yehuda, if you have that Stam Mishnah Bava Metzia, is Mishnah Miktanila, because that halacha is taught over there in Bava Metzia Daf Ayin Vav, Gam Hilchas HaPsikta, by set halachas, where this halacha doesn't belong over there Bava Metzia. It's only because that Mishnah was telling us certain psakim that the Tana said, with all those halachas of backing out, that no one should disagree on. And it says over there, he has the lower hand, he has the lower hand. Therefore, since there's no reason saying it over there, it had no relevancy, it was just saying halacha psukas. That's how Rabbi Yosef knew that halacha would be like that Stam Mishnah. And therefore he was upset at Rav Huna, why you tell me halacha like Rabbi Yehuda if there's no need to, if you have the Stam Masnitin, even if it was, let's say, not necessarily Machlokes Zachach Stam. That Stam Mishnah was obvious that's how we pass it, and therefore I don't need Rav Huna to say anything. Now, the Gemara introduces what we relate back to what we're discussing. So tell me, we'll learn the Brisa. And this is Mois L'Shluchay. Someone gives money to his agent, as you take them in days, to purchase wheat. Now, they were doing this as a profit sharing, which, the agent's going to do the work, and they're going to split the profits. But the problem is, instead of buying wheat, he bought barley. Or the other way around. Instead of buying barley, he bought wheat. Okay. So we have two different brises. The one brisa says, in Pichsui, so if now, because of this, there's a loss, Pichsulai, the loss is to the shliach. He deviated from the contract. And if there's an increase, if there's profits, the profit goes to him. That's one brisa. We'll learn another brisa. In Pichsulai, no, if there's a loss, only the shliach suffers the loss. If there's profits, the profits are split in the middle. So that's a contradiction between the prices. So Rabbi Yehuda is like not difficulty. It's not a stira. It's a machlekes. The first brisa is Reb Meir. The second brisa says that the profits go to the middle is Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, Reb Meir. This that we say the first brisa Reb Meir is like we see in our Mishnah. That he says Shina Kaina. We said in the Mishnah that if you deviate from the intention of the owner, what it originally was, is you're stealing. And therefore here you're changing, and therefore, okay, whether it goes up or down, it's going to be the profit of the loss of the shliach because he deviated. But the brisa that says it goes to the middle of Rabbi Yehuda, the one that he says, like in our Mishnah, he says shina and kaina. The fact that in our Mishnah he says you're getting the lower hand, but it doesn't say that you acquire in our Mishnah, like Remeir says, and he gets to keep the value of the shvach of the dye. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say that. Now Rashi points out, but still Rabbi Yehuda says, if pichsalai, the loss is going to be for the shliach because I didn't send you to make things worse for me. So that for sure he doesn't have to compensate. And if it goes down, it's going to be his loss. But if it goes up, that we split down the middle because the ma'asam, the fact that you change it doesn't take it away from my ownership in the thing. And if it being a profit, fine, we still split the profits. However, the Gemara has the following question. Where do you get this from? Meaning, maybe where do we find your mayor holds that Shina is going to be kaina el b'midah dechazer le legufe, only something that's usable for personal use. Let's say wool, which was the case of our Mishnah, to wear, or the case of the bench that we had in the Brisa to utilize. Maybe there, Meir said that when you change from the order that was done, so that's going to be considered like gezela, because you deviated and it's like stealing, and it's for personal use. But when it's for business, anything that's for profit, so the owner is pleased. He doesn't care that you changed it. Meaning, the guy's jacket that he wanted a certain color, or a bench that he wanted in his yard, you changed. He's upset. He doesn't want it, so you did a shina, so you're going to be kaina. But when it's business, when I told you to sell this house or do this thing, when you have a profit, you didn't change anything. Maybe Meir didn't say that a shina would take it out from the shus of the owner. So therefore, because of that, Rabbi Lazar disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation. He says, Elam Rabbi Lazar, he says, actually, Haba Rabbi Meir. It's not one Bryce Rabbi Yehuda, one Bryce Rabbi Meir. Both Bryce are Rabbi Meir. But it's not difficult, because actually, the first Bryce that is actually Lachila, is actually this idea that he's saying in this question. If for eating purposes, that the guy's particular, I wanted wheat. I don't eat barley bread. I asked you to buy for us or whatever. So then the shin is going to be kind of. The second price is for business. For business, I asked you to get wheat. I don't care. You got barley, went up, fine. Then they're going to split it down the middle. That's Machlekes Rabbi Shloimy and Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Now the Gemara goes back to discuss how Rabbi Yochanan explained it, and it gets a little bit technical. In the West, in Eretz, they laughed. Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that he explained the stira of the brises, that the brise that said that paksu loy, sir loy is like a mayor. But Alib Rabbi Yehuda, the second brise that he said that when they said if it goes up, it's la'em, so you split it, and that's going according to Rabbi Yehuda because shin is not kaina. So the Gemara has an interesting question, it's an interesting conversation. Who notified the one who is selling the wheat that it's for the purposes of the owner of the money, that he should be transferring ownership of the wheat to the owner of the money? Because you told me again, Rabbi Yochanan, in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that, if it went up, meaning if there was a gain by buying the wrong, instead of buying the barley, he bought the wheat, he's going to be split down the middle. So like Rashi explains the Gemara's question, that according to Rebbe Lazar, the second interpretation, that it was all Reb Meir, and when did we say that it gets split in the middle if it was bought for schayr or for merchandise? Yeah, because we explained. The owner is pleased whatever it is, because of a business. I told you this, fine. You did something else, fine. That's not considered mishana. That's not considered deviating, and he's still considered as the agent of the owner, and therefore, the owner of the money acquires it to share in the profits to get 50%.
What about the liability?
What?
And you should be sharing the liability as well.
Yeah, but that's what Rashi said. Liability not because you changed. I didn't hire you. I didn't ask you to do things worse. That's like l'shliach lo lav siyur. We find many times in Shas that I didn't ask you to mess things up for me, to make things better. That I did. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, however, that says that would be considered as changing, and it's not a shlichus, but still it's not a shina kaina according to Rabbi Yehuda. Well, that's difficult. That from whom is he acquiring from? But the owner of the wheat was not being makna this ever to the owner of the monies because he's not pleased. The shliach was not a shliach to accept the wheat for the balamayz because he didn't follow his instructions. So how, pray tell, are you telling me that the balchitin, the seller of the wheat, is being makna to the balamayz, to the owner of the money who hired the shliach, when he asked him to get barley and he got wheat? How's he being makna to him? So on that question, Maskil Rav Shmuel bar Sasrati, he says, wait a second, what's your question? If that's the case, then even if he asked him to get wheat and he got wheat, who's telling the owner of the bar of the wheat to be makned to the owner who is someone else living out, somewhere far away? A number of Rav says, no, that's not difficult. Wheat and wheat is different. The shlichus cover. He's doing his agency. He's like the employer. And he says, Tidi, you should know this. Did not. I'll prove it to you in Mishnah Masechtas Erechim. Mishnah says, whether someone is sanctifying his assets, or if someone, let's say, is taking an erech vow on his own value. So halacha is, ein loi, the treasurer for hektish, doesn't have any rights b'ksus ishtoi, in this guy's wife's garment, to use it as collateral because of the erech vow. Or let's say when he's makdish in the chasim, his wife's garment is not included in being makdish, and neither v'lebik susbanam, not in his children's clothing, and not even v'lebik tzeva shetzav l'shman, and not even garments that were just dyed for being designated for his wife and his children, and v'lebik sandelim chadashim, and not even new shoes, which is a chiddush, even though they're new, shalaktim l'shman, that he bought for them, even though they didn't even use it or get it yet. Now, the question is, Vamai, why are we saying this halacha? Why did you say here also, Mihar di l'tzava? Who told the guy who was dyeing these garments, which the husband was doing it for his wife, to surprise her for her 20th birthday, sheyiknet tzavai leisha, that the dyer should be maknet to the woman, which obviously he has to be, because or else this would be included in the hektish of his nechasim, and it's still the husband's. Obviously, no, because the tzaba was being marketed to the woman. Who told him? Obviously, we say the husband was just doing the agency of his wife. He's like an extension of his wife. We're saying that the agent is doing the agency of the Baal, and he's like an extension of the owner. So when he asked him to get wheat and he got wheat, that's obvious that that's going to work. So that's not a difficulty that chitin chitin. But the question is, when it wasn't the same thing, how do you go ahead and understand how that's going to work? So Amr Rabbi says he rejects this raya that they were saying to say that why chitin chitin is to say why chitin chitin is different, like you see by the ksus ishtoi. It's a little bit of a cheshbon, but it's not true. Don't bring me a raya that is like the yad of the balabayis, like you see that he's the yad of his ishtoi. That halacha is different in Masechet Sirachim. There, kol makdish nechasam. The reason why, when he's makdish nechasam, why it's not going to take effect on the garments that were dyed for his wife, is not because we're saying that the agent is like an extension. That is a valid question. How does chitin chitin work? Also, don't ask only on when you change from chitin to zarim or zarim to chitin. You bring me right from Masechet Sirachim. That's different. Kol makdish nechasam. That's because whoever's makdish his assets in daitag sus ishtaban. His intention is not on that, on his wife's clothing and his children's. And that's why it doesn't work. Not because he's like it's like the tzaba is being maknet to the isha and he's doing it through the husband because the husband is a slave. No, not necessarily. But Reb Zeh asks on this answer we just gave. Really? It's because his das is not on his wife's clothing. So it's a lot of steps over here. But what do you think? A person being maknet to his husband, you think he thinks his tefillin is included too? And yet, now we're looking at Masechet Erichin, Hamakish Nachasu, someone he says, everything's going to Hashem, all my stuff. Malan like tefillin. He has to reevaluate his tefillin, and he has to borrow money, and he has to give it to Hektish to redeem his tefillin, because that was included. What, Daddy has in mind that's going to go to Hektish? And the Rabbi says, yes. The person's thought process is on his tefillin to make it Hektish. You know why? Because Hamakish Nachasav, when someone sanctifies all his assets. So he thinks mitzvah kavin, I'm doing a mitzvah when I'm giving it all to Hektish. And therefore he's like, yeah, I'll give my tefillin also. But a person's thought is not on his wife's garment and his children's garment. It's from Ava because they're going to hate him. And I say, you big tzaddik, what you do in my clothing, whatever it is that. So therefore, that's his das is not on that. So therefore, it's not a raya from the Mishnah says Erech. The Maskevler Rabbi Shloimy also asks on Reb Abba, meaning it's a little bit of a few steps over here, but Reb Abba was trying to resolve the question of the Bnei Marava that they were laughing on Rabbi Yechanan. How does it make sense that who's told the owner of the wheat to be making it to the Balamoyes? And Reb Abba was answering. He says, meaning Reb Abba said. Where's Reb Abba? Yeah, Reb Abba later on. Reb Abba said, no. He said, Kalamakdish Nechasav in Daitak says, actually that's a later step, meaning Reb Avo tried to answer and say that Ochin Nechitin is different because that's Shlichusei. And in the broader Raya Masechet Erechim. Reb Abba was rejecting the answer for Reb Avo, who was trying to answer for the Bnei Marava why they're correct in asking on Rabbi Yechanan, because he says, it's just, the person does not have in mind Ksus Ishtei Banav. On that, the Gemara continues to ask on Reb Abba, because V'lechiva Erech Shanukan, the Mishnah of Reb Avo was talking about where a person taking an Erech vow, like it said, Hamar Chasatzma. And now that is where we said that a person's his wife's garments and children will not be included, even the one that was just Tzava Lashma. Now it's not. We learned the Mishnah says Erechim that says Chiva Erechim, someone who has an Erech obligation, Mashkin Naisai. We actually forcibly take security from him. Now, says the Gemara, you think a person's intention is on himself that security should be taken from him? obviously it's not because of his das. I mean, Rabbi was trying to reject the raya that they were trying to bring to resolve Rabbi, meaning the Rabbi was bringing to resolve the Bnei Rava why their question of Rabbi Yechon was a valid question. But how can you say that you're rejecting it by saying it's not because of being makna, but because of das? What a person intentionally wants that they should take security from him? So the Gemara says, right, that's a good question. So Elamar Rabbi, rather Rabbi says a different way of rejecting the raya of Rabbi. It's called makdish nechasav. Whoever is makdish his assets, nasa kemi. It's as if shehiknul and ksus ishtabanam mikra, as if he first was makna to his wife and his children their stuff, and then he's makdish. So it's not because of a das issue, but either way, it's still rejecting the raya of Rabbi, and therefore the Bnei Rava don't have a good answer. What's the difference between when you hire someone to do wheat and wheat, or when they change wheat and barley? And then that really resolves Rabbi Yechanan, because what are you guys going to do with that? It's the same question you have, and if it's not difficult in Rabbi Yechanan, specifically regarding when you change that he could hold in Rabbi Yehuda, his shiur emtza. That's the end of that. Again, it's very hard to tie that up. We just tied it up and showed how that was the Gemara where Rabbi Yechanan said a teaching. The Bnei Rava laughed at that, says, how could it be shiur emtza? He asked him to do one thing, he did something else. Who's telling the owner of the wheat? There's really balamais. On that Bnei Rava they laughed. That's what they laughed at Rabbi Yechanan in his interpretation. On that, the question was, what according to Bnei Rava, how does wheat and wheat work? Rabbi Rava said, no, wheat and wheat will work. I'll prove to you from the Mishnah Masechtas Erechim. You see that he's considered like when you ask him to do something, you're like a yad of the balabayas, like you see by the wife's clothing. Like, how does the tzava know? Obviously, because he's like a yad. On that Rabbi Rava said, no. What was the no? So we went through a few options of what no is. The no ultimately was what we just said right now. No, it's not because the tzaba. It's because the husband's like maknet to them beforehand, and that's how. But you didn't resolve. You don't have a right to what you're saying, and again, therefore, maybe it's not difficult to be. Now, relating back to what we said before, term in the brayso, halakech sada b'shem chaver. This is also very interesting halacha. If a person bought a field in the name of his friend, not in his own name, in kofin lezelimkar, he's not compelled to sell. Doesn't say yet who, what, when, where. But if he stipulated, then he's compelled to sell. What exactly says the Gemara? My Kama, what are you saying? What is this teaching? So Rav Shai says like this. What it means to say is like this. If someone buys a field for himself, from his friend, b'shem reish galusa, he asked the seller to say, I'm buying this for the Resh Galusa, the Nasi, the leader of the Jewish people. Now, why was he saying this? He was intending to intimidate that no one should come and contest, because no one's going to want to contest with the Resh Galusa. So the seller wrote a document of selling it to the Resh Galusa. On that, halachas in koifin Resh Galusa limker. We don't force now the Resh Galusa to go back and write a sale document that he's selling it to the real buyer, because the document is written to the Resh Galusa. Now, but if the buyer said to the seller, Al Manas, on the condition that the Resh Galusa will write to me in his name, for my name, another document, then then we do force the Resh Galusa, because that was the stipulation, to then now write a document that he's selling it to this real buyer. That's the teaching that the Brisa was telling us. So the Gemara now goes to discuss this. Amama. The time of the Brisa was said like this, as we interpret it. So if someone buys a field in the name of the Resh Galusa, we said, we don't force the Resh Galusa to sell it, for him to write a new document in the name of the real buyer. Now, says the Gemara, the inference is that the buyer did buy it, he just can't force them to write a document that it's being sold to him. Says, let's say this disagrees with what's said in Eretz Yisrael. Because the Amri, they said in Eretz Yisrael, what we mentioned before on the top of the Amid. They disagreed with Rabbi Yechanan based on this svara. Who is going to let the owner of the wheat know that he should be transferring these wheat to the real owner who never asked for this wheat? Why is that difficult over here? Because the seller thought he's selling to the Resh Galusa. And you're telling me that it's being sold to the buyer, he can't force to get a document, but how's it being sold? He's not being mocked. Who's telling him that it's really for this guy? Says no, if that was your point, that's not difficult. No, he told the owner of the field. He let the witnesses know beforehand that it's really for him. He just said, write it as if it's for the Resh Galusa. Okay, that's not difficult. But now they want to ask a question that's difficult even according to Rav Sheshes. Look at the Sefer. The Sefer said, Almanas, if he said on condition, then we force the Resh Galusa to sell it to this real buyer. Amai, why? Why doesn't the Resh Galusa say, Lo yikaraychu be'ina? I don't need your covet that you make me in charge as if like you're using my name to intimidate people. I don't need your denigration that now you come to make me sell fields. Like, why are we forcing the Resh Galusa if he said Amanas, if that's the interpretation of what the halacha is being said? So you're right. It says Rabbi says it's actually referring to a different halacha. Someone buys a field in the name of his friend, which technically could be the Resh Galusa, depending on their kirsa. But as Getin type of Kov Gimel and Aleph, the halacha is in koivin es hamoicher. Not going to the Resh Galusa to be forced the Resh Galusa whose name he used. The difference is regarding the seller. We don't force the seller to sell it another time. Meaning, what do we sell it another time? To go back and write another sale document to the real buyer, because the buyer should have stipulated. He should have notified it. He should have said, "I want you to write a document for me in the name of the Resh Galusa, because I want to have a document that if people are trying to protest, I'll show them that it's Resh Galusa and they're going to back down. But then I want you to write for me another document in my name that." It shouldn't happen that today or tomorrow the inheritor of the Resh Galusa are going to come and claim it from me. So since he didn't notify, it's his loss. Now, that's what the Sefer said. But if he told him Amanas on the condition, then they force the seller to write a second shtar mechira because he had stipulated that beforehand. Now the Gemara explains Amamar. The Brisa had said, if someone buys a field in the name of his friend. So he said that so we don't force the seller to sell it a second time. Says Pshita, obviously, you asked me to write Resh Galusa, I did. What do you want from me? Says no, what would you say? He could tell him, maybe you knew that I'm buying it for myself. I only needed to save it, meaning I just needed to strengthen it to intimidate people. I'm not throwing money away for nothing, buying it for the Resh Galusa. Of course, I had in mind that you write me another document. As we're telling you, the Amalei, he could tell him, well, you got an issue, you got a condition with the one that you bought it in his name. Let him buy you, write you another document. What do you want from me? You never told me, and that's the chiddush. Now, the Sefer said, but if he tells him on the condition, then we forced the seller to sell them a second time. Says obviously that was the condition. Says no, it's necessary. The amalahu l'sadi kamei didei. He told the witnesses in front of him, look, the shtara kabina, I need another document. Obviously that'll be in my name. But with the seller himself, he didn't stipulate. He didn't tell the seller, I'm stipulating with you. In front of the witnesses, he said, guys, I just want you to know, I need another document here. He could tell him, I was saying that you were saying to the witnesses that, I'm going to need you guys, come with me later to the Resh Galusa, that he has to write me a document. As we're telling you, the Amalei, he could tell him, what do you mean? Why do you think I went through the effort to tell the witnesses in front of you and not without you? Because it was from you that I needed the second document, and that's the chiddush of the Sefer, that it could be tevei him to write him a second document. Think to any time.